Tonight, I can report to the American people and to the world that the United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden.
Where we continue to follow the capture and killing of Osama bin Laden now.
Those are just some of the scenes overnight as thousands of Americans gathered in celebration of Osama bin Laden's death.
Former Navy SEAL Rob O'Neill says he has thought about the mission every day since that May Day in 2011.
For multiple conversations you had with Rob O'Neill over the past year and a half, how'd you get
access? And you described that his head kind of exploded when you hit him.
I actually hit him 3 times because I shot him twice when he was standing and once on the ground.
That is the fucking American badass right there.
We are not going for fame and we are not going for bravado. We are going for the single mom who dropped her kids off at elementary school on a Tuesday morning, and then 45 minutes later she jumped to her death out of a skyscraper.
If you need help, hang up and then dial your operator.
I'm Rob O'Neill, and this is the Operator Podcast. Well, all right. I told you we'd make it. Episode 57, this is it. This is going to be very exciting because we always said if you're going to make it to, I think the magic number is 57. I've been saying that for a while, so we finally made it here. I'm very excited. I appreciate you coming along on the Operator Podcast with me, where I talk to other operators. I talk to you as an operator. I tell you what I think. You tell me what you think, and then you respond on Twitter at Mchuya or Instagram at Mchuya, Mchooyah, or at the Operator Podcast. I want to grow that one a little bit because Mchuya has been restricted just a little bit over a year. August 6th, 2022, I got restricted for some reason. I'm still trying to figure out why. But I don't know if everything's getting out there. So try at the Operator Podcast. We'll have some fun there. Tell me what you think of what I'm saying, what I think of what you're saying. I asked the other day, too, on Twitter. Just you can tell when I'm trying to ruffle the feathers. I just asked, why do you hate Donald Trump? And, boy, I mean, you talk about meatloaf within two comments, people will be fighting about Donald Trump and Joe Biden. That's just how it goes. So I asked straight up, tell me why you don't like him. And I want a reason. I don't want because he's mean, but I got some reasons. It's pretty good. I'm going to get into that, but not today. Not right yet, because there's still more to find out, and we're going to wait to see what go on with all these indictments and whatnot. I have the CEO of Seekr Technology here today, Pat Kondo, and Seekr is a new search engine you may have heard of. It was designed to combat misinformation. It's a search engine, and what it does, it gives you there's a couple different algorithms, a couple different forms of artificial intelligence that will tell you where the story comes from. You can get a story anywhere, but it's not discriminating and giving you the first 3 pages of their end of the spectrum. It's giving you an honest, here's what we came up with, here's where it came from, and here's the rating that we give it. So this is the truth, this is not the truth, this is coming from the left, this is coming from the right. But Seekr, Seekr, is exciting. I found out about it about a year ago, I guess, and I've heard Tony Robbins talk about it. Bear Grylls talked about it. I'm talking about it. Seekr Technology. Pat Kondo, the CEO, will be here very, very soon. First, I do need to talk about some other stuff going on. I know you've heard me mention Moink, Moo Plus Oink. It's a subscription meat box, and it's taken off. It's absolutely delicious. The bacon, the ground beef, the steaks. Did you know that 60% of U.S. pork production comes from one company owned by the Chinese, and their hogs are giving something called ractopamine, which is banned in 160 countries, including China, yet you'll find it in your grocery aisle every day. There is a better way, and that is Moink. And that comes from 2 words, Moo plus Oink, for cows and pigs. Moink delivers grass-fed, grass-finished beef and lamb, pastured pork and chicken, and sustainable wild-caught Alaskan salmon straight to your door. And Moink farmers farm just like our grandparents did, and as a result, Moink meat tastes like it should because the family farm does it better. We got to be supporting the family farms because China's trying to buy us up, and I've said before, if you control the food, you control the population. The Moink difference is a difference you can taste, and you'll feel good knowing you're helping family farms stay financially independent as well. And you choose the meat to be delivered. You can switch it up every month. Ribeyes, the chicken breasts, pork chops, salmon fillets, much more. Plus, you can cancel any time. Moink is helping to save the rural American farm. I love it, and you will love it too. Shark Tank host Kevin O'Leary actually called Moink's bacon the best bacon he's ever tasted. I am agreeing with Kevin. It is the best bacon I've ever had. My kids love it. I sent it to my family up in Montana. My wife loves it here. We love all the meat. It's absolutely incredible. I love Moink. I know you will too. Keep American farming going by signing up at moinkbox.com/theoperator. Do it right now, and listeners of the show will get free ground beef for a year. That is some of the best ground beef you'll ever taste. It's for a limited time. moinkbox.com/theoperator. Free ground beef for a year. So that is MOINK box.com/theoperator. moinkbox.com/theoperator. Go check it out. Get the bacon, get the free ground beef for a year when you use code theoperator. moinkbox.com. And if you didn't catch episode 56 last week, I interviewed Jason Koloski from Watchtower Firearms, and I've had some questions about why it's called Watchtower. It's a new firearms company, draws its name from the brave Americans who fought under the Southern Cross in the Pacifics as part of Operation Watchtower. So Watchtower honors their tenacity and ingenuity. Like these legends, Watchtower equips the next generation of warriors to defend our way of life anywhere. Very, very cool weapons systems at Watchtower. They're all made, I've talked about them before, they're all made here in the United States, down in Texas. Born in Texas, American made. Check out, I'm one of the ambassadors there, Ray Cashcare, former Navy SEAL. Very cool ambassadors on board there. We've got different kinds of rifles, different kinds of pistols. They're all custom made, just fine weapons right out of the box. They look pretty. They shoot pretty. They're amazing. And you can check out the NISRO rifle. NISRO stands for Navy SEAL Rob O'Neill. Those are limited and very, very unique numbering system, serial numbers. There's Colonel Allen West. He's got a rifle as well. Cool stuff on the site, watchtowerfirearms.com. Check them out and check out that episode 56 with Jason. Great interview. Check out Watchtower Firearms. Welcome back to the Operator Podcast. I have a special guest today named Pat Kondo. He's one of the smart guys in the world. Just started a search engine and more called Seekr, Seekr. Pat, you want to take it away?
Sure. Nice to be here. And, we 5 or 6 years back, we began to look at what was happening in the world of, information processing and how people are receiving information. And we started to take a look at news, and we saw that it was, as news has grown and social media has grown, it became the principal way that people were getting information to make decisions. And those decisions, would finally end up, as in any democracy, in a vote. And we saw that without the right information, votes can get cast and history can get changed. And so we took upon ourselves the mission of looking at the news and taking it and deciding whether there was really the presence here of what we would call false and misleading information. And we began that journey a while back, and over the last 3 or 4 years, we've built a technology that actually can recognize the presence of false and misleading information, which has led us down the path of saying, as we look across the web and we say, gee, this is not just news, it's spread across all forms of content, and it's also spread outside of the U.S. in almost every democracy that I've visited. Their principal concern is, are people given the right information to make decisions? And we feel they're not. And so our mission is to provide the technology that helps people look at the content, look at how transparent it is, what's the source of it, and then what kind of subliminal suggestions may be present. They could be biases, they could be false and misleading information that's, where there's no attribution or they're personal attacks. And, over the last 5 years, we've seen so much of that, and society's gotten so complex that we feel this is, the right product for the market today.
So in a nutshell, it's a search engine. among other things, and it uses artificial intelligence to help. Is an AI technology that's telling you where the spin's coming from?
Absolutely. We've started my career. I started, 30 years ago in what we would call today artificial intelligence, but it was really things like machine vision, as an example, where, you train a machine to look at a pattern. And after a while, when it can recognize a pattern, and it can do it at a scale that no human can. And if you fast forward to where we are today, all of this technology's come out of manufacturing and places like that, and it's all pattern recognition. And so what we did was we deployed pattern recognition to take a look at content that's produced and extract out signals. And when you separate the signals from the noise and you look at those signals, what are they telling you? And if you have the right detectors, it would tell you this could be leaning towards something that's false and misleading. This could be leaning towards something that's more truthful. And so that's the basis of how we've built it. And as we scale it up, every form of content needs a different type of signal. So if you want to identify something false in an image, you need a different signal. If you want to identify the presence of false indicators in video, you need signals. So we're experts at doing that at massive scale.
So is it mainly misinformation, disinformation, or is it just a spin on someone's political ideologies?
No, it is not that. It is a focus on the first round of detection is this article have indicators that lean towards credible or not. The second activity that we give a user is now you can look at left-leaning center. So the presence of political bias is what we're trying to do. We're agnostic. We're not taking a right or a left position. We're just giving you, the consumer, the ability to look at the content from a lot of different vectors. And we're not just looking at news. We've gone on to podcast, which is another whole area, right? You and I are having a conversation, but in the middle of it, there's personal attacks that take place. Well, people are unaware of that until they listen to the podcast, and then they might say, "Oh, I don't ever want to listen to that again because they're attacking somebody or themselves. Who knows?" So we've developed what's called the civility score, which says a person should have be able to have a conversation. Each side should be able to express its views, and neither side should have be canceled, let's say, as a result of it. And there is also kind of the notion of what's the definition of abusive attack versus comedy or things like that. So all that gets factored in. And once again, it's a score that we put on podcasts. So we're scoring every podcast and giving them sort of the civility score.
As far as like if they're telling the truth?
Not the truth, meaning that that's hard to discern, right? Because you could be an expert at making up facts and figures and other scenarios, but so that would be not our role, is to tell you whether that's true or not. What we might be able to tell you is that there's also a lot of indicators in that conversation that may trend towards not authentic. Like you may go on to say a whole bunch of things and then say, and oh, by the way, the Declaration of Independence was, built after the Civil War, was, and we'd be like, okay, right off the bat, we now know that this is headed in the wrong direction. And that, by the way, is the problem with AI, right? The problem that we see with ChatGPT and other large language models out there is that they have appeared on the scene. They've made it easy for a person to interact with them, but people don't know the source of the content. They don't know the bias that the trainer had to train the model. So when they have it go off and do a task, it sometimes brings back quite a bit of false information, but it's all covered in a very nice package that looks like it should be real and should be something that you could rely on, but in fact, it contains quite a bit of incorrect information. And that's
the stuff the kids are using to turn in essays and stuff like that?
Yeah. So, that's the least of our problems. The real problem is, how about if you get on and you use a computer to magnify your position, and it just continues to produce content nonstop and floods social networks, floods search results, and all of a sudden you're looking at stuff and it kind of looks real because it's got some elements in it that are attractive to you, and you rely on it, but it's not. And so that's the real fear, is that we've got a weak foundation already with the web and how you can trust it across these dimensions. Now you're going to layer on ChatGPT and other forms that just can't the web can't tolerate that volume of false and misleading information. So how do you correct for that, and how do you give consumers or advertisers guidelines around how to measure that? And that's what we do with our score.
Oh, that's cool. And I can do all that.
You can do all that.
Because that when you were listing that off, it seems like there's a lot of little factors in there that make big factors eventually. But yeah, you can tell. Yeah, I was impressed with the Seekr score. There's so much more to it than just 1 to 10, just left or right. Right? There's all kinds of stuff going on.
No, so there's behind the scenes, in the back room there are like 100 different factors that make up principles of journalism, and then there's 350 different cognitive biases that humans have, and so all of these things have been put into software coding and set up like what we would call a neural network. And when an article appears, certain of these things fire off and indicate the presence or absence of these factors, and the sum of these things kind of creates the score. So if you think about your credit score, right, it's made up of 20 or 30 different things. Well, you miss your mortgage payment, well, your score is going to go down by a bigger percentage than if you were late on a store payment. And it operates in the same kind of principle. If some of the big things that are present really indicate that this has to be false, then your score is going to be pretty low. But if there's just a whole bunch of little things, your score could be, medium to high. And if none of these things are present, then usually you get the highest score.
Mm-hmm. And then do they come up on the search just randomly, or are they in a specific chronological order?
News comes up according to breaking news. So as the news appears, we score everything. So, somewhere between, it's always changing, but, 25, 30,000 different sources of news flow in, articles every second. We index every one of them in real time, and we extract the information and do a score rating. So as time goes on, it gets refreshed. And so you have trending news, trending articles, things like that, which indicate over time, like what kind of content is getting, the most velocity at that moment. But one of the more important areas that's become really interesting is source attribution. So you've seen articles where it says a source close to the White House, somebody in law enforcement, an intelligence operator. But when they don't name those people, we've all discovered in the last few years that more than likely this is a false story. Now, you can't say it is, but more than likely it is. That's one of the key indicators, is who is the source of this information. The second thing that we've all seen in the last 3 or 4 years are quotes. How many times are quotes misquoted?
Right.
You make a quote, it's 3 sentences. I only picked the first and the third. And so our ability to do source attribution, our ability to do quote extraction are really critical, because you want to be on record for what you said in the context you said it, not have somebody take your quote and just put the first line, because it's a huge source of false information. Because yes, someone could say, oh, Pat Condo did say that sentence, but that wasn't my quote.
Mm-hmm. No, that's good. It seems like it could clean up a lot of the, and I hate misinformation, but there's certain stories that get plucked, so if certain people don't want you to see it, or if they're saying, and the whole thing with the anonymous, like I said, anonymous source, or from someone close to this, and it never quite works.
No, anonymous sources in just about any case, you really have to think about them, because whether you're in politics or even somebody that is an anonymous let's say, a diner at a restaurant that submits anonymous and puts a terrible review in there, that could be your competitor. That doesn't necessarily mean the person even ate there. So or a product review, anonymous, that could be a competitor. That could be a different retailer. So when I see anonymous, or I say a sources aren't stated, or I don't see anything relative to that, my red flag goes up and says, this is really, really questionable, because this is an area in journalism that has accelerated. The way to make something look truthful is to put enough information in there where it starts to sound and feel and look truthful. And then the only way they can reach the final entry is without any source. They have to make it sound like a real source, but they can't, but without the name, without the date, without the specific notation, I think it's almost valueless.
Yeah, that's what I would think too. I've been involved with a few things where someone wrote an article of what really happened from three anonymous sources. It's like that. I know that didn't happen that way, but you're just telling people this because someone told you or whatever. So yeah, I don't care for that either.
Well, and it's a difficult world out there because, on a very micro level, people's reputations are at stake. So if somebody wants to publish something about you, then all of a sudden it's out there, it's on the internet, and there's really no way to, argue against that, because, you can't, too many resources get expended to try to change the opinion. But in today's day and age, it seems to be allowed and almost acceptable that if you make a false and misleading statement, there are no repercussions to it. And it's amazing to me.
Well, one side more than the other. There are people out there that can get away with anything.
So on that note, I would say, the political arena is really interesting from my point of view, is that there are so many people that get their information from whether it's social media or, the large search engines. And what people are unaware of are that there are nation states, there are domestic activists that use all sorts of methods to amplify their positions and create oppositional types of view, create influence operations, create these things, and they flood the networks here in democracies, and people are unaware or don't have the critical thinking to say, is that really what's happening, or can I really believe that? Without instilling that into people, I fear that that's a better weapon that our adversaries can use than anything else in the world, because it's low cost. They can pulse it into our network, unlimited, and we have no ability to filter it, because unfortunately people make money off that content.
Of course. Yeah. That is and there seems to be a lot of that going around too, just even though different administrations, not necessarily this one, but just pumping false information out just for propaganda's sake.
Well, it's, propaganda has been around forever, right?
Yes.
And it's been, disinformation has been, a weapon. I don't know, Alexander the Great used it, Caesar used it. I mean, the Middle Ages used it. I mean, everybody's used it. Stalin sort of refined it. But now I find that politicians in particular are become experts at how to create, that false and misleading information, and how to perpetrate it throughout networks, and then use things like a confirmation bias that people have to get them to over and over again see things that they now believe that may not have any truth at all to them.
Mm-hmm. If they say it enough, people will listen. And I think that's a problem too with only going to certain sources. And like we're talking about sources, you want to get multi-source. You want to get different views. But I mean, just the stuff that they can turn off. Like they shut the New York Post down with the Hunter Biden laptop story that I'm sure we've all heard about at this point. But
I think that my opinion is that I thought that the Constitution's pretty clear about the values that the country has. And I think for the first time, in any memory I have, there's been exercising some privileges there that seem to go beyond, what the Constitution would, would say. And it's, I think there's always a pendulum on these things. And I think there's a pendulum that's shifting back the other way, saying that, that we shouldn't be trying to influence those kind of operations. And we have other ways to do censorship. We have other ways to look for people that have malevolent intent, but it has to be used very carefully and within, the rules and guidance that have been set up. It can't be a cavalier political tool.
Yeah, but pretty much everything seems to be political nowadays, especially.
That's why we built the political filter, because we want people to see that. And I'm not saying it's even our two political parties. It could even be external parties trying to influence and create chaos, confusion in America. So you take the one of the things that I looked at very heavily was when the abortion rulings came down, and I started to look at, well, what is media companies on the right, how are they discussing this, and how do media companies on the left discuss this problem? And it was almost like they were in two different countries, two different planets, and the theses were different, the facts were different, the thoughts on how it really worked were different. There was, in each end of it, anger was the overwhelming kind of, payload that they put on it. And but you can extend that to everything about race, about gender, about age, about religion. It's always the same. These two ends of the spectrum get supercharged with anger and emotion, and it leads to violence. And that's the part that's kind of dangerous. In my opinion, that's where you have a real problem in your democracy, when every conversation ends in violent encounters.
And it seems to too. And politicians are proving right now they will say anything to keep their party in power. They will. You can look at these people. I'm just convinced they're in such a bubble that a lot of times they don't even realize that they're lying, because everyone around them saying, "Oh yeah, that's right. Just a bunch of yes men."
There's a I always like to say that that people have they create a story and a narrative, and then by the time it actually gets out to the public, it's been, there have been so many participants in enlarging or projecting or amplifying the narrative, that by the time it gets out, it may not even reflect what that person originally thought or said or meant. By the time it gets out, it's too late, because then they have to just support it.
And do you think Seekr can be a big reason a lot of this stuff turns around, where people realize, at least the opportunity to get several sources? Do you think it's going to do that?
My hope with Seekr is that, and what we're seeing is that, in the 2020 election, there was a point in time where a great percentage of people, some people almost say it was like half the country, were so convinced that that social media and search were conspiring against them for one reason or another. And sometimes it doesn't even matter which party you're in, because they all had different views on this, that they look for alternatives, and there weren't any. Well, in the last 4 years, a lot of alternatives have come up. Seekr's one of those alternatives. And I believe as we get into the quote election season, and as we at Seekr start to deliver some of the larger networks that will be distributing Seekr, I think that it will start to grow. And I think there'll be a percentage of people that who are not, let's say, sitting in front of, cable networks all night and have their own very specific agenda, and they're not going to change their mind. My hope is that we get the younger generation who still has quite a bit of learning to do about all these different things, and wants to be able to use a tool like Seekr to see all sides of an argument, rather than be locked into an echo chamber where, everything see just confirms what they want. Because I mean, I think it's difficult for people to break out of that. But I think that, capturing the younger people who then become available to vote in the next 3-5 years, whatever, that's where the change occurs.
Yeah, that's and that's a little scary to think about, but I'm pretty sure every generation has said the same thing about the next generation as far as voting goes.
Oh, it's true. I mean, through every era, every 18 to 21-year-old always thinks that the older generation is wrong and antiquated and the establishment and whatever other term you want. And I think, I actually hope that's what's happening now, because the last, 8 to 12 years here have been, pretty difficult and have, driven us more apart than together. And I don't think anyone would disagree with that.
Yeah, I'm convinced that's part of the big plan of divide and conquer, and other nations playing the long game while we play the short game and try to keep everybody happy. Yeah. So that's
yeah. And, there's a lot of significant kind of interest around the world in this, because, if you step back and you say, well, almost 60% of the world are run by authoritarian governments. And so that leaves 40% that isn't. And in that 40%, you have this internal struggle of people that are separated and divergent and can't have a conversation, which I believe has been orchestrated by the other 60%, because as long as a democracy exists, their authoritarian regimes are threatened. So to me, it's a natural kind of consequence of, you're standing there as, really as a minority point of view, and you've got the rest of the world wanting what we've got, but not wanting the government we've got. And the only way they can deal with it is to create confusion, create chaos, create strife, and then ultimately get, enough division where people begin to think, well, maybe that other political idea or maybe that other way of life is better. And then they win. And that's the biggest fear I have. And it's also the fear of many democracies. I recently was presented at a subset of the G20, which is chaired by India. And I'll be there again in 3 weeks to talk about the responsible use of AI and how we're using it to identify things like be transparent, give people a choice, identify where there's a presence of false and misleading information. And people love it because, for instance, in India, 90% of the people don't even believe what they read in their, local country press. They look outside of their country at the U.S. and at the U.K. And so, in other parts of Western, Europe and places like that, all the same thing. And there's a lot of elections coming up, and they're all fearful and finally acknowledging that this is a real problem.
Yeah, it's it seems like it. Are people generally afraid of artificial intelligence? Do they think it's going to get to a point where it gets so massive it starts programming itself?
Also, I was in front of a couple of universities recently, and the question was posed: hey, is AI good or evil? Does it create jobs or destroy jobs? And the interesting thing is, once again, if you look at history, man has always tamed something bigger than itself, right? And we've even seen that recently with, Oppenheimer movie and nuclear power, and we've got dams and we've got, satellites. So we've always been able to handle something far more powerful than us and harness that type of energy. And AI is no different than that. The rules are human rules. How it's harnessed are based on humans. Can somebody misuse it? Yeah, somebody can misuse anything, right? And so the idea is that how do you harness this technology and use it to create jobs, use it for good, use it to solve problems? Could somebody program, weapon systems to kill everybody? I mean, that again, there have to be safeguards that are built in by humans.
And one more quick time here. Redundancy, I think, is a key to success. If you want to be really good at something, do it 1,000 times. If you want to be excellent, do it 10,000 times. This is called preparation and muscle memory, because as we've seen, our world can change in a moment's notice. So I can't instill preparation enough. And we're currently on the brink of an economic collapse, and it can be scary. But if you don't think you need emergency food right now, wait a day and see what happens. Just don't wait too long. Because as I speak, PrepareWithRob.com is offering a huge discount on their best-selling 3-month emergency food kit. For a limited time, you'll save 25% per kit. This is the biggest discount they offer, but it doesn't come along every day and it won't last long. So do yourself a favor, grab your 25% discount on each 3-month emergency food kit you need. It includes delicious breakfasts, lunches, dinners, and more, providing over 2,000 calories every day. Get at least one kit per person in your family from My Patriot Supply. Grab your 25% discount today before this offer expires. You'll get fast and free shipping too. Another great website, PrepareWithRob.com. Go there now, get your 25% discount, or you may regret it. PrepareWithRob.com. Be prepared. And also, I would be remiss if I didn't talk preparation. It's very important to be prepared for anything. Just because something bad has not happened doesn't mean it can't or won't. And we are seeing, I've been around the world and I've seen the results, seen the effects of reckless government spending, corruption, and inflation. I always bring up the time I went to Turkey for the first time. Actually, a great place, but I saw inflation firsthand. Being a kid from Montana, I wasn't used to taking out 10 million lira from an ATM. I got to find that picture, but I have it. But I had to pay 7 or 7.5 million lira to get in to see the movie Armageddon in a theater in Turkey, which is actually kind of awesome. But that was a result of just government spending, printing so much money that it becomes useless, basically. Bank failures, recklessly printing money, Wall Street manipulation, the volatility of Bitcoin. Who are you going to trust? Trust something real. Stay prepared. Something that has had value since the beginning of time. That's a gold and silver from my friends at Allegiance Gold. Allegiance Gold can help you protect your IRA or 401k with physical gold and silver, or they will deliver it securely right to your front door. Allegiance Gold has the highest ratings in the industry, 5 stars with TrustLink, a AAA rating with the Business Consumer Alliance, and an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. You can invest with confidence because of the quality and service of Allegiance Gold. Right now, get up to $5,000 in free silver on a qualifying purchase when you visit ProtectWithTheOperator.com, ProtectWithTheOperator.com, or call Allegiance Gold today at 844-790-9191. 844-790-9191. Protect your future with my friends at Allegiance Gold. So once again, that's ProtectWithTheOperator.com. Or call them today at 844-790-9191.
I think where you're going, which is an interesting topic, is can a machine, gain enough reasoning power to then program another machine? And that's where it gets interesting, because today machines are at a level of they can only do what you program them to do. If they're programmed to play chess, that's all they can do. They can't go play the piano, or they can't make a salad. They can do what they're programmed to do. The next question is, if they're programmed enough, can they then gain reasoning power and say, hey, today I'm going to play the piano, tomorrow I'm going to make a salad, and over here I'm going to read a book? Well, once that level of reasoning occurs, you have that potential of where it can then create something that can do on its own, that can do some type of harm. So in the process of creating these programs to build into these machines, there has to be safeguards built in, just like there are in any other things that we do.
Mm-hmm. Well, because obviously I'm thinking of the Terminator, and if they decided to get militant like that, that's probably a bad thing. I mean, would it be more like, say it was used for evil? Would it be more of just shutting systems down as opposed to robots?
So think about it this way. Could an AI system be hacked that ran, stock markets? Could an AI system be hacked that ran satellite systems? Could an AI system be hacked that ran, weapon systems, on a battleship or something. I mean, all those things, could it be hacked? And the answer is, they can be probably hacked. There's nothing that probably can't be. But the question is, how many different security features are built into these platforms to avail themselves of eventually shutting something down versus letting it go haywire? That's going to be a challenge. I mean, quantum computing is a couple of years away, but the power of a quantum compute can break any RSA-based code today. So all sorts of companies have formed to create layers around RSA-based code that can protect it from, say, a quantum computer. So it's going to be a battle of computers against that. So anyone with a superior computational advantage needs to be checked on the other end. That's going to be a battle that is just going to continue ad infinitum.
Is it going to be scarier or better?
I think. Look, I think that it's going to be better, but I think there could be some scary moments. And you can imagine, for instance, real life scary moment could be that you're in for a significant surgery and the machine is performing the surgery and it goes haywire. I mean, there's things like that could happen, but that doesn't mean that that doesn't mean the machine itself has reason that you're a patient and I'm going to, do something terrible to you. It's that there's a flaw in the programming that the human who built it, didn't think about. But so I think that, it's a long way before a machine is creative. A machine can reason. A machine can take action onto itself. But I think it's a branch of philosophy. It's a branch of ethics that is growing rapidly, because that's really where it is. It's not the machine itself. It's the ethics and it's the philosophy that has to change.
The ethics, yeah. I mean, that's just kind of up to the person, the designer, though, right? So, but
ethics are, it's interesting. There are ethics, as a profession. There's ethics in law. There's ethics in health. Of course, they're violated because humans are not perfect, so they violate these things and they cause some damages. But for a machine with ethics to violate its own ethics, it has to have a reasoning power. Right, yeah. And that's what I'm saying is, if it's that's a ways off.
What about with stuff like self-driving cars? Because we're pretty much almost there, and that's just they're all connected like a network, so the other cars know where they are. It comes to mind that is it good or bad for everyone? That's a lot of people drive for a living. That takes away a lot of jobs.
Okay, but think about it like this. So that's a really good point. So the vision of autonomous vehicles, probably 10 years ago, people started talking about it, right? Here we are 10 years later, and the most autonomous vehicle we have is you could take your hand off the wheel for a few minutes and put it back on, or you have a lane change detector, or you have something that tells you somebody's coming. But who's the central processor in all that? It's not the car, it's you, because you're looking at, so you're the one, you're still holding the wheel, you're still seeing these things. So I believe that take that for example, we're a long way from where there's going to be a vehicle that takes over from, let's say, 60% of the economy that today drives for a living. There's a long way away. Now, will they be enhancements to people that drive? Absolutely. Maybe these cars or trucks can travel for 100 miles and use, various forms of LiDAR and radar to detect objects and images. But when you're in a city, it's almost impossible because of the unexpected interactions that take place between people and other objects within a city. So I think, the human elements. Same thing with robots, right? I think that, we already have prosthesis that, for people, and those will become more automated. Those will become more powerful. Those will become more linked to the brain. Those are the kind of things where you could say, hey, robotics are really helpful. Or you could put on a suit and you could, instead of working in a warehouse lifting 100 pounds yourself, you could lift, 250 pounds and not walk away with a back injury. And I think there are all sorts of enhancements to the human condition as opposed to replacements. And the only place place that these machines really add value is when it's massive repetition. It's something a machine can do, and it's something a human would not want to do.
I have some smart technology in my refrigerator or in my kitchen, and it's good and bad. Like I can't ever worry about leaving the oven on because it turns itself off. But it does other things that I didn't want it to. Like it went on to a cleaning mode, and it baked the electronics above it at like 600 degrees. And they had to come over and give me a new one. Like, yeah, you shouldn't even turn that on. I'm like, why is it a feature?
Yeah, well, you know what they're going to say to you? Oh, you didn't read the manual.
Yeah, that's exactly what they said too. So I paid for a new robot oven type thing.
Well, everything takes a little bit longer. I mean, Silicon Valley, the masters of marketing, right? So when they say something's here, everyone believes it's here. The truth is that when we talk about things like AI, this, like I told you earlier, it's been in development for 30 years. I mean, we've had factories where they produce, printed circuit boards or produce automobiles that are all driven by robotic arms that just take one piece and put it in another. That's the same. That's all the beginning of, artificial intelligence, because we programmed it to do something a human didn't want to do. The difference is today, now you can directly, as a non-programmer, you can directly interact with this capability. That's the big difference.
That's
cool. Now what you're going to see is how useful is that technology to create real world applications. How expensive is it to do that? And then what comes out of it? Because the problem that one will encounter is, as it starts to create things, there's the error checking mode. So I'll give you an example. Let's say that you were to go to ChatGPT today and say, what happens when you break a mirror? It's going to come back and it's going to say to you, oh, you get 7 years bad luck. Now, that's because that's the most common thing on the internet, and it's the source that it looked at. Well, what happens when you cross a black cat, right? It's going to come back with all these things that that have nothing to do with what your query is, but that's the popular answer. But the popular answer isn't necessarily the most credible answer. Now, just spread that out, and what you get back is over 50 to 60% of all these models that contain content today are incorrect, because there's just not a big enough sample set, or the training set was wrong, or there's biases built in where, who's the Speaker of the House? It comes back Nancy Pelosi. Why is that? Because it doesn't have the breadth to say, well, there was, a new speaker elected, 12 months ago, and on and on and on. So what happens is the person that wants to deploy that application now has to spend all his time saying, well, what's right in here and what's wrong? And it defeats the purpose. So we're still a long ways away.
That is interesting, though, just to think the most popular answer. That tells you about, how accurate polls can be too, because they don't ever seem to. Backing way up. How did you get into this 30 years ago?
So my background is, I started out in guidance systems, and I built guidance systems, as part of teams at Northrop Grumman for the MX missile program. I went on to work on the space shuttle and built guidance systems there. So I was at Patrick Air Force Base, and then over at, it was then Cape Canaveral, and then I went on and did a lot of work in platforms for early computing and networking and software, and then in the late 90s. I took a company public that a large portion of its technology was involved with the NSA, and we were involved in lots of the programs that they had up there, and piloting some new ways to do search and provide sort of knowledge bases for investigators to do their job. And some of it was signal intelligence, some of it was, with other three-letter agencies that, had more human intelligence and needed to do investigations. And then ultimately, they would take some form of action as a result of these reports. And I sold that company to Intel, and then for a couple of years, kind of looked at what to do. 9/11 happened, and a whole host of companies were invited to the White House to, to hear and George Tenet and others, talk about how could this happen, and what could American industry do, to kind of step up to take it so that this would never happen again. And I came out of those discussions with the idea that we should build a search platform that would sit behind the firewall that could be used by anybody, in the not just our intelligence community, but the expanded community that we're all involved in, targeting and tracking terrorists. And so that's where, I got my real view of, we did two things. We built these systems that gathered data through profiling, through search, and provided analysts with the ability to target and track all these things. And then on the other side of the house, we took a look at, what kinds of things could we do on a more forward kind of non-kinetic action. So how do we disrupt, turn them on themselves, get whistleblowers, and go after them? And a lot of that has to do with psychops, and a lot of it has to do with disinformation. And I could see how all these things operated together, and I saw how effective they could be and around the world. And, that sat with me for a long time. And then, fast forward to 2016, and I saw what the first election with Trump and Clinton, and I saw what was happening there. I saw what happened at Brexit. I saw what Cambridge Analytica did. And I said, this same thing, this same, how one disrupts society is now come back to us. And you could see the presence of nation states, whether it's China, Iran, North Korea, Russia, the presence of these bots, the presence of influence operations, the presence of creating conflict, which went the same route as it always does: create concern, create doubt, get people to turn on themselves, create a whistleblower, take action. And that's what is happening today in our society.
Yeah, like TikTok comes to mind. That's
TikTok's like really interesting because no one knows who these creators are. Nobody understands where the data stays when people view it. But more importantly, it's become so vast that there are all sorts of things that are happening on it that are beyond the scope of, let's say, our law enforcement or intelligence agencies' ability to look at it. So one of the things we're looking at are what kind of signals can we see from video that might indicate the presence of human trafficking. So there are believe it or not, there are millions of, videos out there that where, people publish things, and all sorts of bad actors are out there and bad things are happening, but they're in plain sight. Yet there's no technologies able to positively identify these things unless you've narrowed it down to such a scope that somebody can, a law enforcement or an intelligence community can take action. But other than that, the general public has no real knowledge of this. And so, and in particular, from a commercial point of view, advertisers who want to advertise on TikTok or want to advertise on YouTube, who are these creators and what's going to come out next here? So a rating system for them is imperative.
Yeah, I was going to ask, like, you said that no one really knows where the information they're storing on you goes?
No, think about this, you're viewing, a video, and there are literally thousands and thousands of video channels like right now where, it's Russian disinformation. It's about their progress in Ukraine or, and they're all over the world. I mean, people be sitting there with a baseball hat on, a blonde-haired girl that says ABC News, and you'd think it was ABC News, and it's in a Russian operation in a green room somewhere, right? Wow. And they're saying, Kiev's fallen and the Ukrainians are running, and we've got, we're victorious. And it's like, what does that do? People that are listening on the other end who might be in Ukraine might say, "Oh my God, we got to get out of here." Right?
Yeah,
that's the power of it. That's the power of it.
I've seen it too with a lot of stuff going on in Europe on television. Then I went to Europe, and it's like, what was that? Bad shit happens
Absolutely.
everywhere, but I've seen him really exaggerate the hell out of it.
Well, where I got my experience and where this originally happened is this was pioneered, I believe, in the age of video between, the Israel-Palestine, where there's conflict, where they would have video footage of like an Israeli soldier, potentially shooting 3 Palestinian kids, and then they blast it around the world, and it would create outrage. But it was just, an assembled video that was, different events that were stitched together, and that was where I began to learn how, this has become a really powerful force. And now you take it fast forward, 15 years, and you now have, artificial intelligence that can assemble these kind of things, and people without any critical thinking or other sources to verify, that's going to be create real conflict.
But it makes me wonder about how did they do it back in the day when we only had Walter Cronkite, and just got to trust him. Like he can tell you anything he wants.
Yeah, well, so interesting then too, right? I mean, one could say, oh, that's innocent and that was all channeled, and the world is a lot more scarier than the way the 3 channels presented it. But on the other hand, people felt like there was an accountability. They felt like if somebody misled them, that they would be fired and removed from they felt all those kinds of things. But as time went on and the internet blew up and became the primary source, anybody's a source. So when you think about it, how do people get breaking news today? Well, there's 7 billion cell phones in the world, and they're taking pictures, and who knows what, you've seen all these things. There's tons of apps that can alter pictures. They can remove people, they can add people. It becomes almost like, an army of people that have to check what the heck they're getting and whether it's true or not. We used to have news agencies like AP and others that, would provide real-time feedback that was, verifiable. Now it's impossible. But, in today's world of instant consumption, have to have everything. And I only look at summaries. I only look at gisting. I only look at, who recommends it. All these things can be purveyed at a faster rate.
Yeah. Calling states way too early by news organizations instead of the state itself is that's something too that's happened in the last few elections.
Well, look at that. That's an example. But the other thing is that polling is so poor these days because many people who are approached to poll won't do it, and they're just not interested, right? And then other people may take the same poll 100 times. And so how do you, what are the verifications or the trust factors that go in that this was an accurate poll? But nonetheless, these polls are produced, they're published, and they have an effect, a psychological effect on one party or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they use, as opposed to being a quantitative health assessment of where we are relative to the issues. I think they're more used as a tool to damage the other party, and so
yes,
that's another kind of form of warfare, just like fact checkers who only check the facts that are in their favor, right? And so that's a game that has taken something that would have been useful to the American public at large and have weaponized it to be useful in terms of winning an election. And I think that's just another another form of oppression, really, as opposed to liberating people.
Yeah, I agree with you too. That's again, just what's popular, what's the most common answer. That's just I mean, there's even different algorithms. We talked about TikTok that they show anti-American stuff to Americans and Westerners, but in China they see pro-China stuff, that they're even messing with that like that. Like they're fixing their kids to whip our ass.
Well, my view again is that the philosophy of China is that that it's a superiority philosophy, and it kind of pervades everything there, and people within the country are unaware of how we view their country, and in fact, believe that we're the oppressors, and they're very effective. I've been there many times, early in the 80s where it was not like that, and lately in the last few years where your internet's suppressed, your messaging suppressed, everything is surveilled, face recognition, walking in the airport. I mean, all these kinds of things, and it's become a society, where it's data driven, and if you fall outside where they think you're supposed to be, they take action on that, and that again goes back to how an authoritarian regime stays in power. It's historically the way it is.
Yeah, I'm noticing the same names over and over. It's the same people involved. People using Congress as a retirement home. Like, why would you want to ditch all the yes men that just tell you what you want to hear all the time?
You know what? Unfortunately, what we've learned they should take a page out of some of the more successful U.S. businesses, because in business, you're there to serve the shareholders. And so in order to do that, you have to turn your organization over on a regular basis, right? And so, and that's to improve performance and to get new ideas and to remain, true to, the marketplace that you're trying to serve. Why aren't those same things, are almost subverted in government, where people stay for a very long time, they lose touch with what the goals should be, what the constituents want, but they remain where they are, and younger people who have fresher, newer ideas are suppressed or are moved out, or maybe can't gather the right resources, and that is a part of our policy, kind of fabric, I think, that should be reviewed.
Mm-hmm. So I have a question for you. You kind of brushed over it, but I think it's really cool. You were working with the MX missile, correct?
Yeah.
What kind of stuff were you doing with them? Like what kind of designs were you working on?
Well, so the goal of the MX missile was painted on the top inside of the Northrop building, and it said the ability to launch a missile from the U.S. and put it through the goalposts of Moscow. That was it. And so in order to do that, there were hundreds of different contractors that had to be threaded together to create something that could leave the Earth's atmosphere, enter it, and be pinpoint target with the kind of payload that it was going to carry. And the part that was our responsibility was what was called the inertial guidance system, which was the ability for it to be, to use the, celestial mechanics and other kinds of technologies at the time to be able to take that 7,000-mile ride and hit, between the goalposts, which is, quite a fantastic feat to be able to accomplish. And so my whole team, led by some really brilliant guys that, had been building navigation systems for a while. I was, kind of the youngest member of the team, but we constructed these things, and, ultimately, we won at my company the project to build that system. So we provided those systems to them, and then ultimately the same chips that were used to to protect the gyros, let's say, from radiation, which you incur when you start to leave the Earth's atmosphere and then come back in, ultimately had to be built for space shuttles and all other sort of complicated vehicles like that. So that's kind of how I moved between the two kind of platforms, was around the ability, the radiation hardened chips and things of that nature. So there were multiple kinds of missiles. There were short range, long range. They were potentially packaged with fighters and things, but the true MX was really meant to be a long range ballistic missile.
And that's still the best one we got, isn't it?
So I'm not sure. As time went on, that became a much more, let's say, covert types of programs where, the development of, let's say, nuclear capability, in the ability to, let's say, launch something of that nature. As time went on, space became more important. So Earth orbiting satellites played more of a role in kind of direction. And so the entire kind of infrastructure of how those missiles, today kind of could be launched and where they could be launched from, and what kind of mechanisms exist, around those, are a lot more complicated than they were when I was involved. But I'm sure that, just have to think about drones and think about other unmanned kind of things, and you probably get an idea of how these things could be delivered, anywhere. The kind of thing that we were looking at versus what the accuracy and the close nature of what unmanned, unmanned, let's say, propulsion systems could do are pretty interesting.
It sounds really interesting. Like if you're leaving the atmosphere and coming back in, do you want to be closer to the equator to get the most out of the rotation of the Earth, or you got to figure you're launching from different places? Where are you going? You go up and over the poles, down over the South Pole, or what's?
Well, so all of it comes down to, there's a lot that goes into it, but what it really comes down to is that, yes, you have to look at, you have to calculate the spinning of the Earth, and you have to calculate, all of that, and you have to, project that into the guidance system, which, has to be programmed, which is the navigation system, has to be like programmed. How do you get to that particular location? And the spinning of the Earth is one of them, but there's a whole bunch of other things. Heat becomes a factor. There's atmospheric disturbances that become a factor. There's all these things that have to be sort of programmed in. So one can't just decide one day to press a button and it's going to end up where you think it is. There's a whole lot of, it's like I would imagine, when you're taking a long range shot, right? There's all sorts of things you have to take into effect to hit something a mile away versus 100 yards away.
Yes.
And those things that you take into effect, your brain's calculating, with all these different things about what I just mentioned. Well, just imagine something that weighs, thousands and thousands of pounds with a massive payload that's going, 7,000 miles.
Is that a long range? Is 7,000 miles?
Yeah, and they could be longer today, but the target was 7,000 miles. Because again, you have to, look at fuel. You have to, and again, things have. I'm sure propulsion systems have dramatically improved since then, as are the guidance systems. But at that point, we were building guidance systems, and people were barely out of slide rules using calculators at the time. Yeah, so it wasn't like we had a supercomputer designing this stuff. And by the way, I think that my personal take is that those are deterrents, but I don't think they'll, in today, I think the use of those would, in an offensive environment, I think is probably a low chance in my ability, but because I think there's other ways that people could, decide to launch, offensive attacks that could be probably more devastating and disruptive than things like that. So I think those are the things that we need to guard about, which is why the banking system is so important, why the internet is so important, why satellite is communication systems are so important, because any disruption to any of them leave you sort of naked for when that kind of an attack can occur. So I think always something that's going to precede one of those kind of operations. And that's just what I've seen in the last few years.
Yeah, I think EMP could be a big one.
EMP could be a big one. People are looking at other kinds of forces that can disrupt things. But right now, I think the area to pay most attention to, I think, is what's going on in space. I mean, we're launching satellites, as are other countries, on an incredibly, rapid rate. I mean, I heard the other day that, there are so many satellites at low Earth orbiting and some of the high Earth orbiting that, our ability as a nation, to be able to use that as a strategic advantage. Other nations are now able to surveil like United States assets in almost the same manner. And so I know there's defensive operations against that, but it's a never-ending game as societies get more sophisticated. These kind of systems are going to exist more and more, and I think we'll be under the same kind of surveillance that say other nations are under.
And then hopefully someone can't just turn everything off. That would be catastrophic. You imagine if we lost our GPSs? Like, I don't think anyone would know how to get anywhere.
Well, that's it. Turning everything off is like the biggest concern, I think, because if you turn everything off, you have no visibility, and without visibility, anything can happen. And that's why it's so important, I think, that the advancement of AI, I think, is a real strategic weapon for the United States. And there were talks about we should have the government put guardrails around it, control it, slow it down. I say the opposite, because if we slow down, if we give any advantage to our adversaries who are going to push forward, we may be facing our own technology on the other side because we slowed down. We paid attention to political vibrations in this country, where other countries are saying, you know what, let's take advantage of this lag in their sensibilities, and let's build what we need to build way ahead of where they are. And if they get ahead of us and they start to, move in this direction, I think that's when we're going to have some real threats beyond just what we have today.
Yeah, and that just seems to me, am I wrong in saying this? But it seems to me we just want to slow ourselves down, and as opposed to even looking at other countries that are here stealing our technology too. That's intellectual property.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'm involved with one program, and there are 13,000 universities in this country, and the United States, through its different institutes, gives grants to many universities to build, let's call it, non-classified types of technology. And what happens is that there are nationals, Chinese nationals, others that are in these universities that have been using the technology grant to create different applications or create IP, ship it back to China, and then China patents it and then resells it in the United States.
Right.
And so this is a huge, program and problem in the United States, because we never want to challenge anyone. We never want to call suspicion to things. And so as a result, our very kind of democratic ways and allowances of, people to have liberties has been turned against us. And so this particular program is really important because there are thousands of, universities that have Chinese nationals and others that are in very sensitive areas, computer science departments, biology departments, robotics departments that, are in fact delivering, potentially, the results of our development back to their own country. And so if I feel like there needs to be a far more control of where does this money go? Who are the people that have access to it? What are they building, and how does that benefit the American people? And I just think that, the pendulum has to swing back a little bit more towards realizing that there are people in countries and groups out there that are not friendly to us. They want what we've got, and they'll take it any way they can get it.
Yeah. There are people out there that do not like us, I promise.
Yeah.
So,
well, yeah, you would know, you're on the front end of that, right?
Yeah. So, because we've mentioned algorithms, and I'm convinced on social media there's algorithms that it sees what you're watching, so it shows you more of that content. Like if you like fight videos, I don't know why I'm sick of those fight videos, but The ones that I've been fascinated with are the flat earthers. They are convinced the Earth is flat. Convinced. But they make arguments every day, and I love reading them. They're pretty funny. How do you confront a flat earther?
You know, there are so many. The one thing you learn about the internet that there are so many beliefs that mankind have, and they manifest themselves in these verticals that are hard to believe. And so, you know, flat Earth has, you know, since I guess Copernicus developed, you know, the view that we're round in a solar system, you know, that the Earth is not flat, and that but yet there's a sliver of people that want to believe it. Just like there's a sliver of people that want to believe that, you know, the Holocaust didn't happen. There's a sliver of people that want to believe. So these confirmation biases, they develop in a way where they become believers. Alex Jones proved that if you say it enough times, people believe it. And so, you know, there's sometimes not a lot you can do, because even if you confront these people with all the scientific and, you know, historical evidence in the world, they still say, I'm going to believe what I want to believe. And there's not much you can do. So somebody that thinks the Earth's flat, I'm almost saying that's a lost cause. And I almost believe that they might be saying it more for comedic reasons, or some type of economic reason that they make money out of it, because otherwise I don't know how they could believe it.
Yeah, I mean, they interview pilots and stuff that say that the Earth is flat. I don't know if it's a parody or whatever, but so what about the moon landing then? They're saying we didn't land on the moon. We don't have the technology.
So I would put so the one that the moon landing, you know, that's been around for a while, like JFK, that's been around a while. But the one that's kind of the most interesting, which is puzzling to me, is the one about UFOs, right? So here you've got, you know, one of the biggest questions that man always asks is, are we alone, right? And so the answer now is that, there have been UFOs, and there are certain media companies that, you know, say how ridiculous it is, and there are other media companies that are giving it a lot of you know, coverage and credibility, and now there are spokespeople that are coming out, you know, talking about it around the edges. And so you know, who knows what the real answer is there, but that's an area that I think has quite a bit of a following. And I'm curious myself, like, where it all will go. I have you know, if you read everything in the world that, you know, about what, you know, a physicist or a scientist may say, you would say that it's relatively impossible for some, you know, other form of life to exist anywhere like within light years of here. But other people, you know, have a good argument against it. So who knows? Some of it gets spiritual, right? Like, well, you know, if you believe in God, it's like, why would he only create one place where, you know, life exists? So it's a really interesting argument. It's like, how did the universe begin? So those are the kind of things that they're not really conspiracy theories. I think they're differences in philosophy of, you know, and they can get down to some real conspiracy theories, but I think if you back up, some of them have it's about a belief system. It's about kind of spirituality, and that becomes like almost like a never-ending argument as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's conspiracies everywhere. I'm still convinced that Jesus was a redheaded American. Just saying.
Yeah, well, I guess a couple of them got picked up in Afghanistan like that. Yeah,
you'd be surprised you run into in wacky world over there. So. Yeah. What's the plan now with Seekr? What's Seekr going to do?
Well, so we have launched our first product and had, you know, great response to it. We are now talking to many large publishing and media companies that want to use parts of what Seekr have built, whether it's the scoring system or the news system, or you know, our quote extractor, et cetera. We are also looking at implementing our capability in cloud inside of some of the large cloud providers. So any company that wants to use our components can, you know, log into one of the big cloud providers, and our components will be available. And that's how we get to, I think, a mass scale on one end of the spectrum, and then the other end, as you know, the election nears, and as we get more and more visibility, I think we could become a place to go for people that want alternatives to what exists today. And I know that from the last election that there was a huge rush of people that tried to find alternatives other than, let's say, Google, Facebook, and Twitter. They came up, more or less empty-handed. They found Telegram, they found DuckDuckGo, and a couple of others. But now I think there are other options, and people are more concerned now, not as much with, privacy still an issue, but now it's really, what am I consuming? How good is it? And can I rely on it? And I think that's where we're going to shine. And so the next 6 months, we're just going to push, the visibility of the company in all different dimensions, and including through the channel I mentioned, G20, and up through to the UN.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's some big dogs. I know they make the traffic suck in New York.
yeah.
Nice property there. Everybody's got their little security detail, so that's important. So just where can you go to use Seekr? Seekr.com. Is that we're going with?
That's it. That's the website. You can go there and you can see how we've done a bunch of things that we've talked about on this show. Give us your email and stay on the site, because month by month we continue to add new innovations to the site. We've changed a lot of the way the scoring is and things of that, and we'll be illuminating other. We just did the podcast and the civility score, so you'll see how we rate podcasts. Pretty soon you'll see some other things around other content rated. So stay to the site, download it, and you'll see as we approach 2024 election, there'll be a lot of things that you can take a look at, and it'll give you a very good point of view that you may not get anywhere else.
That's outstanding. I'd highly recommend checking out Seekr. I love it just because of what we talked about. You're going to get different. It's not the one side of the aisle. All the articles come up. It's like you said, the Seekr score is there. It tells you what you're getting into, and just different points of view. And when I read stuff, I usually know that I'm right or wrong. So it's like, yeah, I was right on that.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So go to Seekr, check it out. Pat Kondo, thank you for coming on the Operator Podcast. Great time.
Yeah, no, it's tremendous. I love it. Thank you very much for having me.